Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Let me get my levels right. Today is Wednesday. It is March the 20th, and we are rolling live on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. This time, no technical issues. You guys want to hear something kind of fun? Because I spent hours yesterday trying to figure out what was going on. And I did. I pulled into the logs for the streaming broadcast program that I use called OBS, which gives you a little bit of information about everything. And when I got into the files, what I found is that all my files were updated on March the 12th when I was out of town at a time when nobody was in my office. So that's weird. I don't know what that means. But somewhere around 2:28 p.m. on March the 12th, something updated all of the plugin files, which made the streaming software not work. Very weird, very strange, very uncomfortable. In any case, so that's fun. Took me hours to find all that. Now we've got it straight. I had to uninstall everything and reinstall it, and we're good to go. So we are rolling live right now on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Please make sure you guys give us a thumbs up, give us a like. Make sure that you are following the channel and subscribed, and you guys can see the chat is cruising right now. So, folks, we're going to talk about a handful of things today. We're going to get into some Supreme Court ping pong ball, things that are popping back and forth here. A little bit on the Texas border, the Biden bloodbath, the border bloodbath, which has been trending on social media. Kind of fun. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the race on the Texas 23rd, which is down by the Texas border, also important. We're going to get into funding. I love it when the government shuts down. I don't think we're going to see that happen, but we're going to get into it. We got to make sure we're going to do all that. Before we do any of these things, let's go ahead and say thanks to my buddies over at Catholic Vote. They do fund this program in a big way, and they make sure that we can do it. They've got The Loop, which you guys can follow. I actually got an email from them saying that a couple of y'all have signed up and then actually sent them emails to the Loop email saying, yo, I'm following you because of Kyle Seraphin. Well, I appreciate that, guys, and I appreciate you guys telling them that we sent you along. Great stuff. There's a really good story right now, which we're not going to cover today, but it is in the Loop, and I highly encourage you to go to catholicvote.org/loop, or catholicvote.org, and just sign up for it. It says pro-lifers reached a sentiment with the Smithsonian 1 year after the hat incident. You guys remember that? They had some pro-life hats, and they rolled into the Smithsonian, like our federal museum. And the federal government, in so many ways, continues to allow people who are fools be their enforcers, and those fools decided that you can't wear that inside our government building. We are going to limit free speech. It's going to cost them $50,000. $50,000. It's actually our money, isn't it? Anyhow, great story coming out of the Loop. Read that today. Definitely check into it, and you guys will be better informed than you were. So here we go. We're ready. Let's get started. Let's get started right now. Number one, right off the bat, I just want to get into the ping pong account from our SCOTUS. Supreme Court permits Texas police to arrest people who illegally cross the border as Senate Bill 4 legal clashes continue. The ruling allows Texas to start enforcing Senate Bill 4 while the lawsuit over its constitutionality remains pending before a federal appeals court. Well, it's kind of cool. That was 14 hours ago. That's the Texas Tribune. So the Supreme Court sort of reversed itself. It allowed it to come on back. And they said, yeah, Texas, you can start enforcing your bill while we hear the arguments in the lower circuits. The law, which is fairly controversial, specifically because it allows local or state police to arrest people suspected of illegally crossing the border. Now, the people in this area are calling it, the liberals are calling it the show your papers law. The show your papers. They like that because it's a very Nazi type thing, don't they? But it's an interesting concept because we've not had that before. There's no actual state authority per the Constitution, at least the way that it's being argued, to go after immigration issues. We're going to actually talk about some of the constitutionality of that and what it may or may not mean. I think there's some nuance there, which I think the Supreme Court said they would be interested in hearing. Interestingly enough, right after they decided to do this, and they said, yeah, go ahead, knock yourself out. SB 4, good to go. By the way, that was passed in December. It was supposed to be implemented this year and go into effect, but it was immediately held on injunction. And then the whipsaw comes back on. This is the Reuters folks talking about how it has now immediately been suspended by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. So just catching you up, Texas passed a law saying that they were able, or they wanted to, allow local law enforcement to go and stop border crossings because we're seeing the Biden administration fail to do this. The legal injunction was put on them saying, no, you can't do that. That's outside your authorities. Then it made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, which was previously saying, yeah, you can't do that. Now they changed their mind last night. And then again, later last night, we see that the Fifth Circuit, it's got knocked back down and the Fifth Circuit has reinstated the ban. So the net result is nothing. There's a lot of this back and forth play where it feels like victory and it continues to be nothing. In the meantime, that doesn't mean that Texas is not doing something. What they're doing is they're going after illegals, suspected illegals, by arresting them for trespassing and other local and state offenses. So they're not just sitting on their hands in this sort of Operation Lone Star. However, this would be an incredibly powerful tool for them to go in. Now, I kind of had some questions about it because it's like, what on earth are we even doing here? I wanted to bring up this part right here. This is the Constitution section that is in play. This is what says that this is a federal authority. And so if you're looking on the screen right now, what you're seeing is Section 3 of Article 2. This is the president's job description. And I'm going to read it almost in its entirety. It's very short. In fact, all of Article 2, which defines the powers of the executive, is very short. They could actually tattoo it on the president on the arm. That would be helpful for a guy like Joe Biden who can't remember. Section 2, it says, he shall, by the way, it says he, isn't that fun? He shall, from time to time, give to the Congress information in the State of the Union, okay, blah, 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 recommendations of their considerations, judge necessary expedient, on and on and on. And this is the key phrase, I think, in Section 3. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed and shall commission all the officers of the United States. Faithfully executed. I have that song in my head right now from Journey, Faithfully. But the president is not currently faithfully executing the laws as passed by Congress. We know that there were no changes in federal immigration law between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and yet we're seeing a significant number. So the mechanism, the apparatus of enforcement has changed. We've seen a dramatic departure from allowing people in Customs and Border Patrol, from allowing the Customs and Border Protection folks. Sorry, it's Border Patrol and then Customs and Border Protection. Those are the two different agencies. Green is Border Patrol. That's the green uniforms, looks Army green. They are the sort of roving enforcements outside of the ports of entry. And then your CBP is the blue shirts that you see when you come into the country. And interestingly, neither of those groups are able to do their job the way that they're supposed to do. Their job is not to be a welcoming committee, to be concierges, to welcome people that have no right to be in this country without a visa, without applying to come here. We're not supposed to just transport them to the place of their wish, by the way, on our dollar. To faithfully execute the role of the president, enforcement is required because the law says so. And so the constitutional crisis that we're feeling, I don't know that we've seen this before, where somebody is refusing to actually comply with the laws that Congress put out. And a state has stepped up and said, well, if you're not going to do it, we're in. There's small movements in other states as well, because this represents this represents a problem of diluting the electorate. What we're also seeing, there was a really good video that Elon Musk tweeted out the other day, and it was made by, I think, Texas Lensman or something, or what is it, Western Lens. The goal seems to be to get illegals to be part of the voting population, not necessarily as voters, but in order to heavily push them into Democrat areas and then skew the census. And we've been seeing this where they're counting all the people. They used to do this with homeless people too, by the way. And this was always kind of weird. You get all of the people in the area. You assume that they're citizens, even without any evidence that they are. And then you use that to weigh for congressional representation. We have to realize that our House of Representatives is population-based. And so the number of reps that each state gets is based on that population. If you can move people illegally in, and then you still dominate the numbers of legal voters, you still win. Does that make sense? You don't actually have to have more, more of these voters coming in. Even if they can't legally vote, if they are counted and then you outnumber the legal voters in the Democrat strongholds in all of these different population centers, they still win. And that seems to be the case. This is not flying in other places, including like Oklahoma. It's a little interesting article here from the Oklahoman. I dug into this guy because I was really curious. This is possibly, and this is why I always recommend you guys look into, one, who's writing your news. If you see a reporter and you see a headline, usually the headlines are not written by the reporter. It's done by an editor. Maybe it's somebody else at the paper. It's incredibly important to know who it is that's writing the news and what slant and angle they're coming from. And I'll cover that in just a second too, because I think that's relevant. I think that's the meta coverage that me and Mark Naughton are always trying to push out there. The interest is this. What is actually happening? Is it being reported fairly? And then is there an angle that we can see just from the background of what that person presents about themselves? And that's the case. Okay, so Oklahoma bill restricting state dollars to those without legal immigration status advances. Really interestingly phrased. Also, really clunky, is it not? An Oklahoma bill restricting state dollars to those without legal immigration status advances. The way that it's written, they've actually changed this. It's like, what does it even mean? In fact, what I'm seeing on the screen right now, I just realized this. They've changed it. They updated it this morning already. Let me show you what's on your screen, because now I got to look away. It says Oklahoma lawmakers advance bill to restrict state dollars going to people without legal immigration status. That doesn't make any bit of damn sense. That's what I kept looking at. I was actually going to email this guy, and they've changed it. They've changed it to restricting state dollars to those without legal immigration status advances. Okay, the whole point of it is that the state lawmakers in Oklahoma are saying we are not going to give any state dollars to those who don't have a legal right to be here. That actually makes tons of sense. That actually falls within the state purview. I don't think you're going to have any pushback there. What you do have is a bunch of Democrats that are claiming that it's obviously racist, which is quite funny to me. What are you going to do? But amusingly, they had to change their headline because as I read the headline, what it almost seemed to state was Oklahoma was not going to give money to people who are here legally, which is to say citizens. And they obviously reread it a couple times. Maybe they got some questions about it and thought that's actually completely illogical. By the way, the article says the opposite. So I'm wondering if when these people write these headlines, they're hoping that you'll read something, think one thing, and America has a laziness problem. One of our laziness problems is read the headline, never read the actual article, and then have lots of strong opinions about it. This is how the fact checkers get away with this kind of stuff, by the way. I talked about it with Jim Verity the other day, the producer for the Dan Bongino radio show. We had this conversation where literally you'll read a fact check article and it'll say fact check, false, like this thing's not true. Then goes into the article. I think the specific topic we were talking about was this: immigration, illegal immigration, or people coming here illegally. And what it said is the Biden administration, it's false that they're busing and flying people into the interior of the United States. Then it went in to list the numbers of the people that are being bussed into the interior of the United States. They're playing on this sort of click and move tech instinct that we have, which is hit the wave tops. And why is that? Is because there's so much information right now. There's so much volume of information coming at you, like a tidal wave, that you're just going to get a sip. And that sip is probably going to be the headline. Always encourage you. If the headline looks like it agrees with you, you should read to see if it actually is legit. If the headline seems completely illogical, you need to get deeper into it. We continue to find this. So, in any case, what I think is happening is this bizarre moment where the Supreme Court, who previously stopped Texas from doing their job, now it's the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit is up against a real problem because there isn't really precedent for states to deal with immigration. That's not how that actually happens. And the reason why is this. The Constitution explicitly states in Section 8, this is going to be Article 1, so the powers of the legislature, Article 1, Section 8. You'll see the highlighted form that I put right there. It says, to establish, this is the Congress shall have the power to, and then it says, establish a uniform rule of naturalization, which is to say, bringing people into this country. That's it. By the way, they don't elaborate on how deeply this has to be done. But that's the basic clause that says that this is in the purview of Congress. And then you read to the bottom of Section 8, and it says, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying out the execution of the foregoing powers. So they can make all the laws necessary to handle the rule of naturalization. That's what they're supposed to do. And the president's job, again, is to faithfully, there it is again highlighted, faithfully execute said laws. We don't really see a mechanism for president abdicates responsibility to faithfully, and Congress has no ability to force the president to do it other than funding, which leads us to the border, to the government shutdown possibilities, which are out there. Let me say thanks to my buddies over at Patriot Cooler real quick, because they continue to be one of our great supporters. They've been with us for over a year now, and I've got one sitting right next to me. There is mine. This is the 19-ounce coffee cup with suspendable stickers, including our upside-down Betsy Ross suspendables flag. Guys, you can go to patriotcoolers.com. Again, patriotcoolers.com. Promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E. Unlike the federal government, not reliant on taxpayer dollars, and the shutdowns only happen if this company chooses to. Again, patriotcoolers.com. I actually had a Patriot Cooler tumbler with me the last time the government shut down, because I've been using these things since 2017. Last time the government shutdown was 2019. As Chuck Schumer has accurately pointed out, it's totally worth knowing that even when it was shut down, I could still get a cup of coffee, and I still had my money. You know why? Because I saved money, because I was a good government employee who got paid a decent wage, like so many of them do, even if they are going to food kitchens and trying to set up like a food pantry. Anyway, patriotcoolers.com is where you can get your own hot or cold tumbler. Again, promo code Kyle saves you 10%, $50 or more, free shipping. Listen, that's actually true. I sat out in the snow on a surveillance case while the government had shut down, and people were discussing whether or not they would have money to pay their mortgages. We hadn't even missed a paycheck yet. And at the end of the day, I think we missed a paycheck for a few days. When these government shutdowns happen, what really goes down is all the parts of the government that are completely useless, which is a huge chunk of it, they don't go to work. And then they sit around, and then they panic, and they drive Uber, and they go and deliver food and do other kind of like gig type stuff, and they make money. And then the government gets refunded, and then all of them get funded for not working. They all get paid for the time that they were not at work because the government set them down, through no fault of their own. But the wild thing is that you, the taxpayer, me, a taxpayer, even as a federal employee, never saw a break in continuity of capabilities. It didn't go anywhere. There was literally no loss. We literally didn't lose anything while the government doesn't show up. All the critical functions still happen, and all the people that don't do anything just stay off the roads. The only major difference that I could see when there was a government shutdown in Washington, D.C., having been in the belly of the beast and working both in D.C. and in the surrounding areas, the only incredibly major accomplishment of a government shutdown is that traffic around D.C. doesn't suck anymore. You can drive directly to where you need to go, and you can drive directly home, and there's not a bunch of fools taking up space. That's it. That just tells you how wild it is that we fund 3.1 or 3.4 million federal employees. But those people also vote, and Congress hates upsetting the people that pay for their lives. I told you I would tell you about this guy's the story about coming out of Oklahoma. And I read this like sort of randomly. Here's the rabbit hole. A reporter for this newspaper, the Daily Oklahoman, there it is right there. The Daily Oklahoman wrote this. They're associated with USA Today, I guess. They're part of that bigger family. And this reporter reached out to Moms for Liberty and asked why they were calling people who are offering free mom hugs. These are women and men who are not the moms of children. In order to affirm gender ideology, we're offering free hugs, which sounds super creepy to me. And Moms for Liberty rightly pointed out that if you are trying to enforce gender ideology with loving reassurance by a non-parent in a physically affectionate way, then you are grooming. That's what that is. You are grooming these children in order to reaffirm something that is your ideology and has nothing to do with the values of the kid, and you have no right to be involved in that. So they rightly called them out as groomers. Boom. Easy. This reporter, who's a young she/her, coming from the University of Oklahoma, my alma mater, pushes out, well, why do you think they're groomers? Is that what you're trying to say? And so she writes this email, which was published yesterday on social media, not to a huge audience, but it went out there. And so I followed up with this lady. She immediately blocked me, by the way. She blocked everybody else. She's now private. I don't think she's ready for journalism. If you can't handle a little bit of criticism and or questioning, then what are you doing? So anyway, that got me down the rabbit hole. It found this story going that Oklahoma is now following Texas, which makes sense because they're so close. And then you've got that story written by this guy. And I just find it fascinating that we are talking about someone who is a state government reporter for KOSU, but also previously was known for covering race and equity. Why on earth? I keep seeing this in the news media. And news is probably not appropriate. It's more like the propaganda ministries. But they keep putting out news about race and equity like that's an actual topic to cover. It's only a topic because that's the focus of these people. It's completely absurd. And if you've ever been to Oklahoma, if you spend any time around Oklahoma, it's completely detached from the reality of people who live in Oklahoma. I cannot fathom that they need to have a race and equity reporter in America, in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is about as red as it can get. When I lived there, it was like the most sensible place. Just regular people. Like I said, I tell you what, that's where the cross-eyed bear story comes from. Just regular people doing regular things, and it's completely bizarre to think that they would hire this guy. But this guy actually had a pretty cool story. He says that he grew up with the circus, that his family rolled around with an RV. I love reading about where the reporters come from, and I highly recommend that when you read a story that you highly disagree with, that you check out who that person is. And if you agree with it, you should also find out what that person is and find out why you agree. You need to know where your news comes from. Again, this is kind of this proxy thing that I keep advocating for. We need to keep looking around and finding out what the source of the information was. Anyhow, this was a little piece here. It just said, the Democrats said that this is obviously racist. It's racist for you to not give state money to people who didn't pay into the system. If you have to give money to illegal immigrants or illegal aliens because racism. That's the only thing that's being held over. And as many of you guys know, I mean, I think most of us have reached that point. Being called a racist today in 2024, particularly by the people that we don't have any respect for because they abuse it. It's like the boy who cried wolf. They've overused a term that no longer has any real meaning. And so it doesn't actually have force of impact. We're not going to listen to it anymore. I'll just embrace it. You can call me a white nationalist. I don't care. Like my friends don't care. I went and did an analysis, like a personal analysis, a little inventory. My father-in-law said something about how guns are basically like a white racist sort of issue. Many of you in the chat will probably know that that is absurd. And I did a little analysis and inventory of my personal close buddies that shoot with me. And none of them were white. Like my closest friends that I went shooting with, none of them were white. I had a guy who was a Taiwanese immigrant and a social worker. That's kind of funny. A friend who's Hispanic, military, got darker skin than either of his parents. That always makes me laugh because he just got kind of like a lot more color and he spent a bunch of time killing bad guys in Syria. Got a buddy who's a Green Beret. He's like half black, half Asian. Like my closest gun friends are not white. It's not a white issue. But they'll try to smear you with racism because that's how they are going to try to get it over. That's an emotional appeal. It has nothing to do with facts, which you guys obviously know. Let's keep pressing on because the most fun thing that came out in the last 24 hours is this story. Y'all ready? Check this out. If you're looking on the screen, what are we looking at here, folks? We are looking at the Daily Wire saying Biden's top intelligence agency says cross-dressing makes man better intelligence officer, internal documents show. They've got this FOUO unclassified document by Anonymous. And the title of it is My Gender Identity and Expression Make Me a Better Intelligence Officer. It's a picture of a purse and some pearls and some lip gloss and some perfume, some kind of like a leather tote. What on earth? Allegedly, this is the statement, and I have no reason to doubt. They say internal documents obtained by Daily Wire. This looks like FOIA type stuff. It's kind of shocking because this reminds me exactly of what Mike Waller was talking about. It says, I'm an intelligence officer and I'm a man who likes to wear women's clothes sometimes. Like what? This was a newsletter circulated around agents at the Central Intelligence. So they're misusing the word agents again. These are going to be case officers and analysts and so on. It says agents at the Central Intelligence Agency and Federal Bureau of Investigation and throughout the intelligence community were distributed a newsletter that celebrated an intelligence official for cross-dressing, saying that dressing up in women's clothes made him a better intelligence officer, so saith the internal document. The director, this is the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. If you don't think your intel community is woke, y'all are not paying attention right now. There's this whole book that we did a story with Mike Waller about. It's called Big Intel, right? Big Intel is the story of how these Cold War warrior institutions have been completely captured ideologically. And a lot of it happened beforehand, but Obama's administration, especially moving in this requirement for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which is hands down the stupidest thing to spend federal money on. It's people that are working against what I would say average Americans even understand. And there's a reason why the FBI's Human Resources Department doesn't have an American flag on the wall. It has a rainbow flag on the wall. I just throw my hands up with that one. Like, you can't make it up. Here's a quote from the article. It says, I'm an intelligence officer and I'm a man who likes to wear women's clothing. Sometimes my gender gender identity and expression make me a better intelligence officer. I don't actually disagree with that necessarily. That might be because you're pretending. It says, the officer goes on to say that in order to cross-dress, it merits attention given the climate of discussion around the topic and where it sits in the larger conversation about gender identity and expression and professional appearance. It's just unprofessional. Dude showing up in a dress is unprofessional. It should be. It used to be categorized as mental illness. So you have to wonder, how do we go from calling these things mental illness to celebrating it as a potential value for intel case officers, for recruiting people overseas? Is there a huge, outside of NPR, is there a huge requirement or desire in other nations to see Americans dressed up in the wrong gender's clothing? I don't think so. I don't think there's that desire. Like I said, unless you listen to NPR, like we talked about the other day, unless you listen to them and believe that 85% of the world, like in Kenya, are confused about what to do with their body parts. I just don't think it's there. Bizarre. And it's also incredible that this wasn't just like some guy's personnel report. This was a unclassified newsletter. This would be known internally as propaganda. All right, the FBI puts out propaganda to their internal thing. They do it on the classified system, even though the stories are unclassified. That's how these things get circulated around. So just for people's kind of awareness, for you all to kind of understand, when I was working for the Bureau, we had 3 different systems. We had what was known as, what the heck was the unclassified system called? It was just called the green side. That's all regular internet, nothing fancy. And you have your email servers, the way that you have in any other company. Then we would have what we call the red side, which is also known as the SIMPRNet if you're in the military, and it's known as BuNet or BureauNet. And BuNet is classified up to secret, no foreign. There are like 3 levels of classification that we deal with. One is unclassified, one is the secret, no foreign level, and then the above that is top secret. And then the last one is known as Scion in some places, and that is our yellow side. The yellow side is the top secret stuff. But all the major transactional business of the FBI and for a lot of the other intel communities, if you're not like working on top secret stuff, they're dealt in this sort of secret, no foreign. That means no foreign contact, no foreign sharing. It's a caveat that goes along with the word secret. That stuff all kind of lives as the daily transactional business. Emails are sent that way. It's why it's so hard to get records sent back and forth and requested via FOIA and so on, because a lot of it is, even though it's marked, portion marked, like you're seeing this particular thing on the screen. Let me throw it back on the screen again. If you'll notice, the portion marks are where it says by anonymous. There's a little parenthetical U right there at the bottom where the title is, or by the author. That means that that particular section is unclassified. The actual title itself, my gender identity, that's parenthetically U, unclassified. These portion marks mean that that section is unclassified, but it might even have classified information in there at some point. All they need is one line that is classified secret to make the entire document secret. This is something that's gone back and forth. It's actually probably more in people's awareness because of the Trump documents, because of the Biden documents. You can have an entirely unclassified paper and have one simple sentence in there that knocks the classification of all news media coverage and publicly available information up to secret, up to top secret, up to compartmented because of how it's gained. So once you understand that, and once you understand that they tend to dwell in these safe little zones, that's why a lot of this information is compartmented. That's why even accessing those computers and taking something off of it that's unclassified can get you really locked up. It can get you completely sideways, even though there's nothing classified about what you're doing. You're on what they would call an environment, or you're in the zone where the classification exists. And I think it's all done on purpose. Like, there's no reason why a law enforcement apparatus should be operating in a classified environment for most of it. Like, almost no cases involve classified material. Almost none. Criminal cases are overwhelmingly public information. Do you know how I know this? Because you're going to have to give discovery to an attorney. You're going to have to go and argue this in court. You're going to have to make filings that are statements of facts that go to a magistrate judge. All of this information should not be hidden and housed in a classified environment, but that's how they do it. And then it's no longer accessible to everyone else, just like going into FBI space is not available to everybody. It keeps people from having normal access. Anybody knows you can go down to a police department, you can get a tour. You need to be chaperoned, and you have to have someone at your side at all times when we're talking about going into intelligence agency space. It's yet another piece that I would say backs up and sort of barricades that position that the suspendables have said, which is essentially that these people have become intelligence agency first, primarily. Not only do they tell you that, but they also act that way. And that's why this stuff doesn't come out very often. In any case, of course, Odie and I pushed this thing out and created it through the Intelligence Community's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Office. They've added an A. The A is the accessibility. It's nauseating and crazy. So all of that makes me say, shut it down. Just shut it down. Apparently, we're not going to get the shutdown. Apparently, we're not going to. Before we talk about the government shutdown and what they've kind of come to and agreed to, which is basically screwing us, let's cover down on this real quick too. Let's say thanks to our friends over at 4patriots.com/Kyle. That is the landing page, folks. If you go to 4patriots.com/Kyle, you can see basically the pitch for getting yourself some emergency food. And right now, I'm going to kind of have you focus on the rule of threes. In survival school, they always tell you that you can go for 3 weeks without food. By the way, that is miserable. Having gone like a week without food, 3 weeks, yeah, you can live, but it sucks. You can go 3 days without water. You can go 3 minutes without air. You can't go 3 seconds without a hope. That's kind of the clever piece. But the recommendation is generally to hedge yourself against in the rule of threes. So they offer a 72-hour, that's a 3-day food supply. That's not going to keep you very long. 3 months gives you a lot of wiggle time. That's 90 days. Get a 3-month food supply for your family. They're all set up in basically to feed a family of 4. That's how the calories are all lined. And then you can hold on to it for up to 25 years. These are packed in a way in America that are going to be able to sort of sustain themselves. They taste better than MREs. Despite any disagreements, the Palestinians would be much happier if they had some 4patriots.com/Kyle equipment. Go there, and then you have to scroll down a little ways. You can read about the pitch and how they do it. You'll find you can add to the cart. You have to go down a little ways on that page. But 4patriots.com/Kyle for this oncoming, what are the upcoming unrest. How about government employees do that too? Wouldn't that be nice? Then they could handle a government shutdown in a better way, since they're not particularly prepared for it at this moment. In any case, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. Crisis averted. Biden administration is going to be able to handle it. This is coming from the AP. That's what you guys are seeing right there. That's Chuck Schumer's scowling face. Biden and congressional leaders announce a deal on government funding as a partial shutdown looms. Again, I'm always for no one for speaker. That means they can't bring any funding bills. And I'm also for shut down the government every time we get a chance. The biggest reason to shut it down continues to be this. All of you will realize that when the government shuts down, it doesn't even affect you. It doesn't affect you at all. Now, you remember, some of us were spending this time as they were talking about swapping over to the new speaker. They were trying to bring these 12 individual appropriations bills. You guys remember that was the promise? The promise is that funding would be broken out individually by cabinet department, and then the executive would be funded, each piece one at a time. And you'll notice they never do that. So the game is as follows. Make a promise. We're Republicans. We're going to be fiscally conservative. We are going to individually fund individual parts of the government, and everybody will be able to see it. And we all know they're lying. And we know they're lying because what they do is the minute that they get elected, then they see that there's a shutdown coming up. This is not a surprise, by the way. It's kind of like saying that the election caught you off guard. The election has been scheduled for decades out. We can literally look at a calendar and know when things are going to have to happen. There's actual federal statute that says when the budget is supposed to be submitted by the Biden administration. They came in late, by the way. And then there's also a requirement because we know when the funding runs out. You know when it runs out. Every single year. It's always the same. It's like being surprised that taxes are filed on April 15th. It's not a surprise. It's out there. But what they'll do is they do these continuing resolutions, also known as CRs. And the continuing resolution is essentially saying, we're just going to keep things as they are. We don't want to touch this right now. It's not because they can't come to agreement necessarily. A lot of it comes down to the fact that they are playing on the American attention span, which is short, which is headlines only, which is wave tops, which is drinking a little bit from the tidal wave that comes at you. And so their hope is that if we can just get out of this funding crisis time and kick it down the line, we can eventually do the same thing that we always do. This is the argument for a uniparty. This is the argument for everybody's goals are co-aligned. If they were serious about it, it would be easy. And they wouldn't be putting hundreds of pages of legislation for 72 hours worth of reading. Man, you want to talk about not eating? How about trying to read hundreds of pages of dense legal wording and try to suss out what they've actually pushed into it in 72 hours? And then make a vote, yes or no. And stand and try to represent 40,000 or 100,000 of your constituents and what they might want from you. It's totally illogical. Biden said that he'll sign the package as soon as he receives it. Big shocker that if they're going to send a big spending bill, that a Democrat president will sign it. Apparently, they've reached this agreement as of yesterday, and they are going to set the spending levels through the end of the year. Now, the government's fiscal year begins on October 1st, so it ends in September. So it's only a few more months. It's like a little bit more than half the year left at this point. Bizarre. And the House now has a rule that lawmakers get at least 72 hours to review the bill. So it's going to take until Friday before they can actually pass this thing, which we expect them to do. They've sort of been floating out their ideas that they cut the FBI's budget by 6%. Ooh, 6%. Nobody's going to even notice. They've been inflated over the years. So the final spending bill hit a late night snag, funding for Homeland Security. The contours of that bill were resolved late Monday, and Mike Johnson said that the relevant committees are now drafting bill text to be considered by the full House and the Senate for as soon as possible, and then they can go out there and they can do this. Democrat leader said a similar statement, saying in the next few days we'll have a completed draft. Congress will consider it. The action comes 6 months into the fiscal year. So they kick the can down, and they're off cycle, and the hope is that you're not paying attention. And they've been passing things in sort of this like half-ass way. Wouldn't it be nice if our government literally just had to say, okay, education department, how much money they get? 0. That'd be good. What if they looked over and they said, commerce department, that seems important. We should be able to regulate commerce. That's actually a constitutional duty. We'll give them whatever they get. Oh, DOJ, you've been misbehaving. You're going to get a 50% haircut. And we're going to get rid of all the intelligence stuff that you're doing. This is how it should go. It should be broad, sweeping, and very bold. And instead, it is the opposite of that. We're talking about roughly 30% of the discretionary spending for the year. The lawmakers passed that in early March. So now we've got the rest of it coming down. They've been focusing on this larger package. Now, again, they promised 12 independent bills. I love that if you get far enough down, overall, there's going to be 2 spending packages, and it provides about a 3% boost to the DOD. What's fun is, even though they said they were going to take it down and do it in 12 individual appropriations bills, they're going to do it actually in 2. So instead of giving us 1 big monster bill, they're going to do it in 2 big monster bills that nobody's going to have time to read all the way through. And then business as usual continues. The AP actually says they managed to break the spending bills into 2 parts, like that's somehow a success. This is very similar to me in the way that the FBI sort of talked about how they were really good and that 702 was totally not a problem. They only violated the Constitution like over 250,000 times instead of millions and millions of times. So like that's a great success. 96% success rate, 4% failure and violation of your civil liberties is what it is, right? We keep seeing it. Here's another little story covering down on it. This is coming from USA Today. Said that they averted a shutdown and a crisis, and they all act like if the government shut down, it would be a big deal. I don't know why the press thinks this. I don't know why the press has no idea. Most of these people seem very young, and they actually have never lived through a government shutdown, or if they have, they didn't know it, which is actually the point, that if the government shuts down, you wouldn't know it. And I've said this a few times on this show, but I'll say it one more time. When they shut down in 2019, there were emails going FBI-wide. Again, they were going out through that secret system. That secure enclave is what they call it. And as they did, they were letting people know. Employees that have been making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year on a high school education for decades, literally decades, these are the kind of people they're talking to. The people that were working in the nail room, which is supposed to send mail, but just has ladies painting their nails all day. Those people were informed that there was going to be a food pantry set up in our federal building, in our space that the American taxpayers pay for. They were setting up a food kitchen where people could donate, where other employees could donate to the employees in the building, because I assume equity or whatever, or because even though you've been making that much money for decades longer. Honestly, when I got to the FBI, that was the most money that I'd made, if you can believe that. My wife and I were living on, $30,000, $40,000, no problem. It's harder when you have kids. You move in DC, it gets a little harder, but those people are making twice that. And for decades, like they've learned how to figure out how much money they have. And still, you've got a food kitchen being emailed out on FBI resources, letting people know, and then folks can come and get canned foods and things like that. And, durable, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. These are the same people that would wear like lab coats every day, even though they didn't work in a laboratory. In any case, I don't want to get too deep into how weird and stupid my old agency was. There is some good news. People are getting fed up with failure at local level and the national level. As I said, Texas has now passed this bill saying that they're going to start going after the immigration crisis on their end. It's not nothing. We covered a story about squatters yesterday. And almost immediately after that, not because of us, just because people in New York are fed up. I imagine people in Seattle and Portland are also going to get fed up with it. Look at this. Boom. From the Daily Mail, that garbage organization that ran not real quotes from me. Here we go. You ready? It says that vigilantes showed up to evict squatters at the Queens home where the neighbor was just arrested. So maybe people have just had enough. They just don't want this anymore. Neighbors said they saw 3 people had been living there for free and are carrying out work inside. This is the strangest thing. I read this whole article and it's like, what on earth is going on? Apparently they're drilling holes in walls of this lady's house. This is Adele Andaloro. This is the woman we saw talking the other day who was wearing the earmuffs. She's the owner of this house in Flushing, New York. And in Flushing, rather. And she was arrested. Why? Because she went into her own home that she owns, that she has the deed for. And people have squatted inside and said that they live there, and therefore the police arrested the owner. We're living in the upside down. That's the same problem as what's going on in Oklahoma. The idea that you cannot give, when they wrote the headline, it actually said, you cannot give state funding to people who are legally in the state. Obviously, they got the headline wrong because that's not what Oklahoma is about. But New York is actually probably likely to write something like that, saying, hey, just because you pay taxes here doesn't mean you get benefits of our service. We're actually going to arrest you. So 2 vigilantes showed up to evict the brazen squatters. And what I have here, actually, I'm going to show you real quick. So there's the headline. Let Let me push this up here. There's the headline. This is the actual the article on the webpage. I wanted to scroll down. The reason why is because this is what actual journalism would look like. And there is somebody that started taking photographs of this of these vigilante guys that show up. One guy's wearing a Trump shirt. How interesting. It's two white guys, different ages. And I wanted to just show you what it would look like if people were doing real surveillance, which is to say sitting out and taking pictures. This is one of the dirtbags right here. This young looking guy, he's standing on 2 feet. He's wearing gym clothes. He's got nice brand new clean sneakers. They look like they're not cheap. He has like a little man purse thing that he's carrying and a cell phone. So he's not like some indigent person that can't get dressed and doesn't have clothes. This is the homeowner getting walked out in handcuffs behind her back from her own home that she owns. This is the lady that lives there. This is classic surveillance photo stuff, like where a tree gets in the way and you didn't burn through, what they call burn through if you don't focus the lens correctly. But this is what it would look like if you actually set up outside of something where something was going bad. I've told folks this before. I said we could do such good work. The surveillance teams that I was working on, all we needed was cameras and radios. A couple of people sitting outside following people around, like maybe an Ilhan Omar. If you wanted to find out what she's about and where she lives and who she's hanging out with, this is how you do it. This is a picture from ABC. These are the two guys getting ready to go out there. He's wearing like a Salt Life looking t-shirt and they're pissed. They're literally getting ready to try to evict these dudes simply because there's the guy in the Trump shirt. They're trying to evict these dudes because they're like, this is injustice. This lady, this poor woman is having her home stolen. So maybe we can do something about it. Like I said, this is how all these things kind of work. There's the confrontation that happens. Can you imagine breaking into somebody's house, pushing them out of the way? They're getting Uber Eats, so they're so poor that they have to steal this house and squat in it, but they can order food. They can't even be bothered to go get their own food. So there's a motorcycle or a scooter rider that's bringing this out. There's the lady again. Anyway, I'm just kind of scrolling through these because it's shocking to me that they are walking in and out of a house that they don't own, that they didn't pay for, and people are getting fed up with it. They're sick. They're thinking, we're in a sideways world. Where the taxpayer-funded law enforcement is actually attacking the people that are paying for it. And it's happening at the state level, happens at the federal level. So everybody's kind of seeing this. It's why I think this backswing is going to happen. Because even people that who knows how that lady votes, doesn't really matter to me. The odds of that not paying off in the long run, because people are going to go, you know what? Safety first. You can't take my house. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, aka property. We need this. The basic natural law. We're breaking the social contract. We're giving things away that are not ours to give. And the state is making decisions that, like, you know, if you wanted to make your house available to somebody, knock yourself out. The state is now going to arrest you in your own home? No. It doesn't play well. And that's probably why we're seeing some movement of candidates that are pushing back against the status quo, that are pushing back against the garbage. Hopefully this guy, Brandon Herrera, who's down in the Texas 23rd, he's in a runoff right now. Hopefully he's one of the guys that would be okay with the government shutdown. And we'll definitely reach out to make sure that he knows that. But here's a little article that I rolled up. I thought this was kind of fun. You guys remember that we talked about Tony Gonzalez. We've had Victor Avila on here twice. I think I've had Victor on twice. And he was running in this district. He wasn't successful in his run. This is one of the other guys that was challenging the garbage Republican, aka the Rhino, Tony Gonzalez, who's representing the Texas 23rd. So what you're seeing here is NBC News. He didn't grant them an interview. Maybe he'll give one to us. Maybe he'll come on and talk with us. But he's a gun tuber or a YouTuber that does gun stuff. He goes by the AK guy. This is Brandon Herrera. Definitely a Second Amendment dude. That's helpful. And he's forced a runoff. Gonzalez didn't get 50% of the vote. So now we're going to have a runoff election before it goes on. And the interesting thing about that, I think, is that Gonzalez is terrified and running hit pieces all over social media. And this is one of them. The best part about the hit piece for me is that it got a community note, which is readers would like some context. Let me just read you what it says. So Team Tony Gonzalez, this is Tony Gonzalez for Texas is the handle. It's an anti-Trump. Brandon Herrera has trashed Donald Trump on numerous occasions. Perhaps Herrera has been too busy begging for clicks on the internet to notice, but Donald Trump is the GOP's presumptive nominee, and the America First movement is stronger than ever. His anti-Trump remarks are a slap in the face to Republicans everywhere. Well, we know that's false because we're talking about a rhino clown here. But the fun part is that it got community noted, and then you're seeing the picture, which is how Brandon responded. Number one, every single thing that this team Tony Gonzalez puts out gets ratioed. If you're not familiar with that, essentially, it means that the response got more likes and traction than the original post. So Brandon puts this thing out. It's a picture of him standing in front of Trump Force One, Donald Trump's plane. He's dressed up, and he said, yeah, I used to work for Trump in 2016 to help him get elected. How about that? And then because we have X, because we have Elon Musk's platform, you actually see the reader's context saying this is categorically false. He worked for the Trump campaign as evidenced by his own photograph. This is a poor attempt at slander by Team Tony. I don't think it's slander. I think it's actually libel, which is false written. But it's a political hit job that's not landing. And then it says this account has been posting false information since he moved into the runoff on March 15th. Very fun. There's a little bit of a pushback. People are looking around and going, you know what? This establishment status quo thing, it's garbage. It's garbage. And it's not effective. And we don't want it. So I don't blame them. Let me say something about Contingency Medical real quick, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of the constitutionality of it. ContingencyMedical.com. You guys can go to that website if you are interested in making sure that you are not left out in the cold when it comes to getting flu or cold on the road when you're traveling. If you don't want to go to a doctor when you feel sick, you can go to a doctor in advance. You guys know my motto is always prepare, don't repair. And contingencymedical.com. Promo code Kyle is one way that you could do that. You simply go to their website, you click through, you go, and when you click the purchase, add it to your account. It's about $300. You get about $10 off for our promo code. You will be able to upload your medical history. That's just whatever you want to share with the physician that's relevant. Usually medical allergies and significant medical issues that you have, if you have any at all. Push that in. They're going to respond back and approve you. Then you're going to have a licensed physician in your state grant you a prescription for multiple courses of antibiotics. There's several contingencies should you get sick, and you can have all kinds of different things that you can take care of while you're on the road or while you're at home and you just don't feel good enough to go to a doctor. I remember going to the doctor being sick. It's my least favorite. I don't go to doctors if I can help it, and Contingency Medical is actually my kind of hedge against my dislike of the medical industry, whatever that means. I really dislike going to doctors now. Every time I read something about a doctor pushing back now, it's like, you guys lost all your credibility in 2020, y'all. You sold out. It didn't make any sense. And I had physicians tell me as much when I was in Idaho. They said they watched their colleagues just sell out their credibility. So let's talk about credibility. Let's talk about something that's, like I said, it's interesting that we are now in this constitutional crisis. I really think it is. When the president is refusing to faithfully execute the duties of his office, Congress has the laws. They have the authority. The plenary authority is what several court cases say. Unless the Supreme Court overturns that, it is believed, and it makes sense based on the plain wording, that Congress has the law. The Supremacy Clause says that federal law should trump state law, so you shouldn't be able to step into that space. But this is a little interesting to me. There's two pieces of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that we often overlook. Amendments 9 and 10. You guys know I love the 10th Amendment. It's my favorite. I would like to get a t-shirt made that just says, remember the 10th, like the Remember the Alamo. But the 9th is also very interesting. The 9th Amendment, and this is a little quote from the Reagan Library, it's the Enumerated Rights of the People Amendment. People just move over it and they don't think about it. What it essentially says, here's the actual quote, the actual text of the amendment. It's very short. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What that says is that just because there are some rights that are listed doesn't mean that the Constitution lists all the rights that you have. The people retain any number of rights. It's not an exclusive list. This is the thing that tells us that our rights are God-given. Again, it's saying it without saying it. Our rights are God-given. They do not come from the government, which is the continual push that we keep hearing right now. This leftist belief that the government actually grants you rights. It is the opposite of that, and the 9th Amendment affirms that. Remember, just because it's listed does not mean that's the only rights. Very important to recall. And then the second is the 10th, which says that if it's not explicitly left as a right, okay, the power is not delegated to the United States, that's the federal government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. It's a complicated clause. It's a complicated phrasing. The powers that are not given to the United States government, they are left to the people and to the states. It doesn't necessarily address what happens when the federal government falls down on its job, but I would assume, because of the Ninth Amendment, that it doesn't explicitly say that the states should not be able to take care of themselves. They were thought of very differently. The problem with looking into all of these little into all of these like future court cases, the reason why we like originalists is because we go back to the actual wording. All the court cases that have come and been decided since the passage of the Constitution could be irrelevant. If you look back and you say, based on the original wording and what it meant at the time, there's no reason for any of that case law. The problem with our education system is that these people don't necessarily learn the constitutional context. They oftentimes are only interested in learning about all the case law and how it's developed and what people think and why they think this way. That's why we're seeing some of these rollbacks that have happened with the new Supreme Court. With more originalists on the court, you're going to get a truer answer to what exactly is going on and what it actually says in the Constitution, which is what we should all hope for. We should all want that. That's what I would say. Now, I'm going to do a 5-star review, or I'll do a review. I don't know if it's 5 stars or not. They don't do reviews like that on Spotify. And then I'm going to cover one more thing because I think it's still relevant that Hunter Biden is going to be testifying, or he's not going to be testifying, sorry, but he's going to be the subject of a hearing. Before we get to that, let me do this and I'll tell you why in just 1 second here. So, folks, we do appreciate all of the reviews that you guys put out there in the world. And this one is no different. I got Tiny Geek saying, such an excellent episode. Facts followed by reason. Love you, Kyle. Really appreciate it, Tiny Geek. Very friendly. How about this one? This one's a little bit more of a push. This is from Mike Filomio. Hope I didn't mispronounce your name, Mike. He says, I'm a fan. Thanks. If you're going to trash Bobolinsky, we're talking about Tony Bobolinsky, fine. But we need to know more than we'll leave it at that to take you seriously. Second time I've heard you say it with no info. Very CNN-like. All right. It's a fair push. I do like to leave it at that. However, let's do this one right here. Y'all ready? Okay. So, Fox News reporting, final story. Former Hunter Biden associates are expected to testify publicly in the next phase of the impeachment inquiry. Hunter Biden will not be expected to attend. His attorney rejected the invitation for the public hearing, which, by the way, they also requested. Well, that's kind of an interesting little thing. Representative Jim Comer, he said this was an opportunity for Hunter Biden to have the public hearing that he wanted, but instead he's not going to be there. All right, and who's going to be testifying? Looks like they're going to have a guy who's going to be doing it via prison call. They're going to bring him in from a minimum security prison, a guy named Jason Galanis. He's in the middle of a 14-year prison sentence, but he's going to do a virtual testimony. And then Bobolinsky is also expected to testify. And the Democrats, because they're very serious and they really want to get to the bottom of this and they want to know, they're going to bring in Lev Parnas to talk shit about Trump. That's literally why he's going to be there. So they're going to do their basic routine of all these serious hearings where they go, but what about Trump? And then they do this. Now, you'll also see on the screen right now, I don't just have the Fox News article. I also have a tweet from a guy named Mike Singleton, who either still does or used to work for NBC. I think that's correct. I'm going from memory. And what he said is, Barron Trump turns 18 today. He's fair game now. He's fair game now, Barron Trump, because he's 18, because he's an adult. Do you remember how much time we have been hearing about how Hunter Biden is not fair game because he's not the president? Even though he's a 50-something-year-old man and they completely infantilize him, now they're going to take shots at Barron Trump. I just think that's really crazy. But we're going to have a hearing about it. I don't expect a whole lot. What we are going to hear about is some stuff from these two gentlemen, one in prison, and again, Tony Bobolinsky, U.S. Navy veteran, who I have said on this program is garbage. He's a garbage dude. And now I'm going to back you up. So, without all of the specifics, because they're not mine to give, I will tell you that a member of the Suspendables, someone who I think is beyond reproach and whose information is unimpeachable, did work for Tony Bobolinsky since we've come out publicly and got juked out of money for it, got screwed over. And it was really shady work too, in the end. The scope of the work started one way, it ended something else, and there was not, and then he didn't pay. So it was a money-losing deal. I think Tony Bobulinski screwing over an FBI whistleblower that's trying to support a family is a piece of garbage. That's what I'm going to say about it. And I say it based on personal experience from one of my really close buddies who's gone out there in the world and done something with it. So you can take that for what it's worth. If that's not enough for you, so be it. You can put it in the comments again. You can respond on Spotify again, and I'll look. If you guys want to, you can always contact me at KyleSeraphin.com, by the way. There's a contact me there. Send me all of your questions, your comments, your sarcastic remarks. I'd be happy to read them. I respond to many of them, but not all of them. Some of them get really, really weird. And we do the show for you guys. We do appreciate it. Also, we also have the merch store, which actually is for you because it was being demanded. This is an opportunity for you guys to support the O'Boyle Family Sweatshop. You can go to the-suspendables.com. Again, the-suspendables.com. The promo code there is Kyle again. It'll save you 10%. Why? Because why not? Because it'll save you 10%. I'm wearing a version of that shirt right now that you see on the screen. That's the OD green one. That probably is my favorite shirt that they make. He's also just got the Kyle Seraphin Show shirts are starting to ship. So they say TKSS, which the boys and I have been talking about for a long time. But promo code Kyle on the-suspendables.com is going to be that merch store. You guys can check it out if you are so inclined. The pins are still available. I think there were like over 1,000 on order because Glenn Beck really pushed us and squeezed us. Again, no money goes to this show at all. It's 100% to support the O'Boyle family and Mrs. O'Boyle, who is the owner of said company, The Last Line Strength. Yeah, go ahead and give them a look. See if there's something on there. The version 1.0 of the Kyle Seraphin Show shirts say Kyle Seraphin Show. We're going to work on the ink, but you guys can get one. You can get one of the OG ones. They may be limited edition. We may change up the logo. They've got a Suspendables badge on it, TKSS, and the S is in the final badge. Pretty neat. All right. That is it for today's show. Appreciate all of you guys being here. I hope that you have a wonderful, weird Wednesday, which it certainly is that. And looks like we have sorted out some of those goofy issues on the broadcasting software. You guys can put it in the comments below what you think was going on. If you're looking to support any of our sponsors at any time, you can always find them in the show notes. They are always listed by link, and they're very easy. You guys can go through there. The promo codes are all listed, but the promo code is always Kyle. Till tomorrow and Thursday. I hope you guys have a great Wednesday. God bless you, and I'll see you real soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.